And her husband, Dall, was in the Army for 22 years. And I want to read you a brief synopsis of his story because it's the story of so many veterans. Douglas Dall was born at the Naval Hospital at Portsmouth, Virginia. As the third child of 6, the military has always been part of his family. All members of the family, including grandchildren, has served in one branch or another. During his 22 years of military career, Doug was involved in the Vietnam War, Grenada, and Desert Storm. He has been stationed in Korea, Japan, Germany, and Saudi Arabia, and has traveled to over 27 countries in all 50 states. Doug and his family have lived in New York, Massachusetts, Virginia, Georgia, Alabama, Arizona, Washington, and Alaska, as well as Germany. He has 3 daughters. One was born in Dinuba, another at Frankfurt, Germany, and the last at Fort Huachuca, Arizona. In 1992, Doug retired as a Chief Warrant Officer 2. His field was communications and electronics. And Chris and Doug, both every year at this concert, they supply all the flags of the different branches of the military out there in the lobby. And so now I present you to narrate We Stick Together with Chris Dall.
We stick together. They were called the Fighting Sullivans. At least that's the name Hollywood used in the story of the brothers' wives. They had their share of fights even before the war. Life in Waterloo, Iowa was tough in the decade before World War II. And the boys, George, Frank, Matt, Joe, and Elle were rarely seen apart. They enjoyed each other's company and were always ready to come to each other's defense. Tom and Alina Sullivan created a good home for their family on Adams Street. Tom had a night job on the railroad, which required him to sleep during the day. Alina's full-time job was with lots of help from her daughter, Genevieve. The boys ran freely around town. They enjoyed anything to do in the outdoors, including hunting for geese, ducks, and rabbits. The boys also loved fishing and had many adventures on the Cedar River. They once found an old leaky boat, patched the holes with mud and sticks, and went sailing. When the repair job failed, the craft started sinking. Everyone but Elle, the youngest, could swim, but luckily he was rescued by a bystander. This event solidified the bond between the brothers, and they vowed to protect each other in the future. Their fierceness and drive for adventure were unshaken. Joseph, known as Red, owned a motorcycle. He made quite a name for himself as a racer. Sometimes the boys even climbed a railroad water tower to overlook to their dad. Rumor has it, the boys also had some musical talent and often sang Irish melodies. During the Great Depression, education wasn't a priority for some American families. So the Sullivan boys were allowed to drop out. The brothers got jobs at the raft packing plant and earned enough for recreation at the local taverns and pool halls. A weekend highlight was dancing to the big band music at the Electric Park Ballroom. The music. The Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. No one, including the Sullivan brothers, could imagine how the world was about to change. They immediately thought about their good friend Bill Dall. He spent so much time with their sister that he was almost considered a sixth brother. They knew Bill was serving on the Arizona. Soon the news came that he had been killed. Now the war was personal. The boys left the room to discuss their plans, the same plans that thousands of Americans were making. Their dad knew what they were talking about and asked them, what shall we be, boys, Army or Navy? George and Frank had already served a stint in the Navy, so they convinced their brothers to go that route. Alita had overheard the discussion and was already crying when they announced their plan. Al, who was the only married brother with a young son, could be exempt from serving. However, his wife knew he would be heartbroken to stay home, so she encouraged him to follow his brothers. The Juno was heavily damaged in the battle, but it began limping back to safe harbor. On their way there, another torpedo struck the Juno. Sailors on the other ships described the explosion as one that no one could survive. Just over 100 of the nearly 700 aboard survived the second attack, including George Sullivan. After a week in the life rafts, only 10 survived. Most, including George, died of their injuries, dehydration, or shark attacks. Back in Waterloo, rumors of the Juno's loss began circulating. Alida, desperate for the truth, wrote a letter to the Navy. When the same recruiter who had signed the boys up showed up on Adams Street, Tom Sullivan asked, "How many?" "All 5," was the reply. Anyone who has experienced the loss of a family member can understand their deep sense of grief. Losing 5 sons was almost more than anyone could bear. Can you imagine all of your future plans for birthday, family gatherings, Thanksgiving, and Christmas all destroyed in an instant? All of Waterloo shared their grief. Sympathy poured in from across the country. Even President Roosevelt penned a personal letter. Tom and Lisa vowed that their sons did not die in vain. They took the country at their own expense for naming the sail in war line. In 1943, Alina Christian, the USS Sullivan, the ship earned 9 battle stars in World War II and 2 in the Korean War. Hollywood made a movie about the boys, and there were many other tributes in the city of Waterloo, Iowa. Al's granddaughter had the Sullivan Christian in the USS Sullivan in 1995. There isn't a member of the United States Navy who doesn't know the story of the Sullivans. We look forward to the day when every man is The Sullivan family symbolizes all Americans who sacrificed to serve our country. Military members and their families all suffered during war. The supreme sacrifice made by these 5 brothers represents the best of the United States. As citizens of this country, the least we can do is remember and never forget who they were. The people are gone, but the memories of what they did can last forever.